didn't only say animes there, the evolution of anime. I think I also had goosebumps on those old videos of taken from Japan. Konnichiwa, I am Jam des. I feel like I haven't watched any of this. I only know Doraemon and Goku. That's all I know. Okay, in this video, we're going to watch the evolution of anime. Okay, thank you so much for being here, guys. For always supporting my channel. I really appreciate. Let's do this.
If you don't remember a time
who is
before
this?
anime, that's probably because this popular form of media is over 100 years old. Yes, really. It's come a long way since its humble beginnings, and now we've even gotten to the point where Netflix is creating its own anime. Now join us as we dive deep and talk about the history of anime and how it's evolved over the years to get to its current state. If you claim to be an anime fan, do you know the first anime ever created? If not, no worries, you're still a fan.
I don't know.
You're gonna be an even better informed one. The first anime created was a short film produced by Junichi Kochi all the way back in 1917. To put that into a fictional historical perspective, keep in mind that the first Red Dead Redemption starts in 1911, so 6 years before the first anime was released. Namakura Gatana, or the Dull Sword, was only 4 minutes long, and it was a silent film about a samurai who purchased a sword with a dull blade. It's possible there were older
so that's the first
Japan,
anime. Oh wow, this is so interesting.
And displayed publicly. Many people
Are you
believe
sure
the
it's
word
the
anime
first?
is short for the word animation and refers to animated content from Japan. But in Japan, anime is simply the word for any animated cartoon, whether it's produced in Japan or not. Of course, for the purposes of this video, we'll be using anime to refer to animated content created in Japan specifically. The early days of anime are difficult to recall, and not just because they took place so long ago. See, back in those days, you couldn't just make digital copies of your projects. These movies were run on film reels, which would change hands over time and eventually be broken down into single frames or strips to be sold for profit. It was a nice way to make a few bucks, but a poor way to preserve history. We do know there were several prolific anime creators who emerged following the release of Namakura Gatana and were instrumental in shaping the anime we're familiar with today. There's Oten Shimokawa, who is considered one of the primary
Namakura
founders of the genre.
Gatana.
He worked as the cartoonist for the magazine Tokyo Puck and was eventually hired to create short animated films. Unlike other animators, Shimokawa didn't stick to paper and pens. He used a wide variety of mediums, including chalk and wax. These unique artistic choices translated to big savings on production costs and an intriguing finished product. Anyone who says you can't put a price on art, well, clearly hasn't made any themselves. Shimokawa's 5-minute-long film was called Imokawa Mukuzo Genkenban no Maki, or the story of the concierge Mukuzo Imokawa. This film actually had a theatrical release, and many people consider it to be the first true anime. Shimokawa would go on to create 4 other films, but sadly his career was cut short due to health problems. Like so many other films created during this time period, these works were also lost forever and no trace of them remains. As if it wasn't hard enough to preserve anime around this time, there was the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923 to contend with. Of course, it did a lot more damage than just destroying many early anime films, but the films were victims too. The already struggling medium was pushed even further back as a result of this natural disaster. Still, as the industry rebounded, anime was starting to catch on in Japan, but there were some difficulties. The foreign film market was positively
these are real
booming.
videos
The presence
now.
of Disney was both a blessing and a curse.
How old are
Of
these
course,
videos?
Disney was massively popular in Japan, just like it was pretty much everywhere else. It provided inspiration for many notable names in both anime and manga, but it also prevented many people from creating their own cartoon content. Because these cartoons had already made money in their home countries, they were available for low prices in Japanese markets. This meant creating anime wasn't a profitable venture, and it was nearly impossible to compete with Disney in terms of both quality and quantity. But that doesn't mean people
Hey, I'm
weren't
having
trying.
goosebumps here.
Kenzo Masaoka
These are not
created the
animes
first
already.
anime with sound, Chikara to Ona no Yono Naka, or Within the World of Power and Women in 1933. He would go on to co-found Japan Animated Film Studio in 1948. Because it was hard to create commercial anime, it was mostly used at this time to create PR films, educational films commissioned for the government, and military propaganda. Producers now had resources to create their anime, but the scope of what they could create was limited by who was funding them. This got even stricter during the Second World War, when the government censored and controlled published media rather strictly. Yes, most of the anime created around this time was in the form of propaganda cartoons, and yes, they're strange. But even in classic propaganda films like Momotaro no Umiwashi or
Oh, okay.
Momotaro Sea Eagles, you can see
It's
the
good to
influences from
know.
Disney animation. The 1937
It was not
Disney
for
film,
entertainment
Snow White and the Seven
purposes.
Dwarfs was a momentous moment in film history. It proved that cartoons could be used to tell a story in a long format. In 1956, Japan Animated Films started doing business in another name which will sound familiar to anime fans, Toei Animation. Yes, the same Toei Animation responsible for some of the most iconic anime of all time, including the Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball franchises. But we'll get into those in depth a bit later. Toei Animation produced the first feature film anime in color in 1958 called Hakujeden, or The Tale of the White Serpent. This movie even got an American release in 1961 and inspired Toei to continue producing feature-length content. Unlike other animation studios at the time, Toei believed in letting their animators do their own thing and showcase their creativity. Today, most anime fans are familiar
So they
with
really
the works of
began
legendary
this
animator
anime
Miyazaki,
thing.
who co-founded the famous Studio Ghibli. He's responsible for films like My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, and Princess Mononoke. Well, before Studio Ghibli was a thing, Miyazaki worked for Toei Animation and helped create the film The Great Adventure of
anything
Horus,
of
Prince
this.
of the Sun. The film was directed by Isao Takahata and was widely considered the point at which anime began to break
Seriously,
away
I
from
really,
more
honestly,
Western
I don't
storytelling
know
styles.
any of
There's a
this,
scene
but
where Horus fights
it's
a
so
giant
interesting to
fish,
know.
which is stylistically similar to many scenes in Studio Ghibli projects. Toei also figured out ways to cut costs while still creating quality content. One method was to emphasize important shots with copious animation while falling back on limited animation for the rest of the film. In the 1980s, Toei would collaborate with companies like DiC Entertainment, Marvel Productions, and Hanna-Barbera, creating cartoons for Americans. Yet weirdly enough, Toei produced the first 3 seasons of Muppet Babies as well as a handful of episodes in the 4th season. This collaboration and ones like it helped forge a connection between American and Asian animation studios. But Toei wasn't the
That's so
only
cute
big name during
characters.
this time, and in
What's the
fact,
title
the
of that?
successful studio managed to make an anime. Osamu Tezuka was a prolific manga artist, animator, and producer who many people consider one of the fathers of manga. He's even been compared to Walt Disney in terms of his contribution to the entertainment industry. For a time, Tezuka worked for Toei, but in 1961, he founded his own studio, Mushi Production. This studio was responsible for early genre-defining creations like the Astro Boy television series, which was highly influential at the time. Following its release, there were many subsequent projects involving robots and/or outer space. Mushi was also responsible for anime like Kimba the White Lion and Princess Knight, one of the few examples of a shoujo anime from this decade. Although it created quality content, the studio experienced financial difficulties and went bankrupt in 1973. But by then, Tezuka had moved on and formed a new animation studio called Tezuka Productions. The 1960s were a big time for anime. Senin Buraku, or Hermit Village, became the first late-night anime in 1963. This was an anime that wasn't for kids and was considered pretty risque for the time. The first magical girl anime, Sally the Witch, was broadcast in 1966, and a year later the original Speed Racer began. This show would not only be a hit in Japan, but in the West as well. 1969 was the start of the Sazae-san anime, which has won the Guinness World Record for longest-running animated television series. Not only is this surprisingly simple show still going, it's still incredibly popular to this day. The market for anime was constricted in the 1970s due to the fierce competition for television spots.
Really?
But that doesn't mean there weren't some gems which stand out, like the boxing anime Tomorrow's Joe and the first installment of Lupin III. The anime that was getting produced during this time was experimental, as novice animators were suddenly thrust into
Lupin III, I know
directorial
that.
positions. We saw the beginnings of mecha anime, with projects like Science Ninja Team Gatchaman, Space Battleship Yamato, and Mobile Suit Gundam. In addition to these action-packed anime, there were also projects aimed towards female audiences, including Candy Candy and Rose of Versailles. During the 1980s, Japan was enthusiastic about the Star Wars franchise, and we saw this reflected in the many
he is
space-themed
saying
movies
too
which
much
kicked
that
off the
I
anime boom
don't
of the
even know,
1980s.
okay?
We saw series like the Super Dimension Fortress Macross and Mobile
It's
Suit
not
Zeta
all about
Gundam,
Japan
which was
anymore.
a massive success. Not only was anime popular, but it had developed a dedicated fan base who were even buying magazines about anime, including Animage and New Type. During this time, Studio Ghibli was founded, and their first film was La Puta, Castle in the Sky, which is still popular to this day. Dragon Ball became so successful, it influenced the martial arts genre for decades and inspired other anime and manga, including Yu Yu Hakusho, One Piece, and Naruto. Not only was awesome content being created, but it was a profitable venture. The movie Kiki's Delivery Service was Japan's highest-grossing movie in 1989. The 1988 movie Akira was a flop when it premiered in Japan, but soon became a cult hit overseas. It was the most expensive animated film of the time with a $9 million budget, but was unable to recoup the cost in Japan alone. Now it's widely regarded as one of the greatest animated science fiction films of all time. Worldwide, it made about $49 million at the box office. In the 1990s and early 2000s, anime grew leaps and bounds as it became more profitable and studios were able to use more resources to create it. Princess Mononoke became the most expensive anime to produce at that point in time when it was released in 1997.
See, the characters are now.
Many series during this time had international success, like
the details of the character are now complex.
And Digimon. And many of these shows are still going strong today, including the massive success of Pokemon and all of its spin-off movies. Experimental anime like Ghost in the Shell, Cowboy Bebop, and Boogie Pop Phantom gained audiences. Evangelion inspired the creation of anime, which incorporated complex storylines with giant fighting robots. Not only were people enjoying simple slice-of-life anime, they were heading to the theater to see big-budget films like Metropolis, Paprika, and Steam Boy. Miyazaki's Spirited Away became the first non-American film to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature and became the highest-grossing anime film. The launch of Toonami and Adult Swim on Cartoon Network gave anime a giant boost in North America and led to anime-influenced animation, including Avatar: The Last Airbender, Samurai Jack, and Teen Titans. Not only was anime popular, but it was now easily accessible to international audiences. In the 2010s, streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime began licensing anime, bringing it to an even wider audience. Now Netflix is even partnering with Japan-based animation studios to create their own anime content. Over the years, anime has gone from a struggling industry to being comfortably mainstream. It has no shortage of fans both in Japan and overseas, and has influenced media all over the world. Still, it remains expensive to produce, and recouping the cost is a big risk. Partnering with resource-heavy institutions like Netflix could be a great way to make a profit and create quality content. Now, whether or not this will become the future of anime remains to be seen. So what do you think the future holds for this popular genre?
Wow, that's so amazing to see the evolution of anime. So I didn't only say animes there, the evolution of anime. I think I also had goosebumps on those old videos of taken from Japan. Wow, I am so amazed that at those times they already had video cameras and still keeping up to these days. Oh wow. And of course the evolution of anime from the very simple characters to these very complicated and more detailed characters, and the market, and the revenues that they had got from the animations. It's good to know. Wow. Okay, and this is iamjam, guys. Thank you so much for watching with me again, and I really hope to see and watch with you in the next video. Bye bye. Have a nice day.